This is Sharks for Kids. Hey, it's Jillian and Candace from Sharks for Kids, and we're here in the Turks and Caicos Islands for Project Lemonade, collecting data from young of the year and juvenile lemon sharks. We want to understand a little bit more about where they're spending their time, how they're using this critically important mangrove habitat. And in order to do that, we're pit tagging, we're taking different measurements, and learning a little bit more about these amazing animals. So stay tuned for more on this exciting project. All right, 1, 2, go, buddy, go.
There are legends of the deep. Ancient and elusive, they are the keepers of balance in our oceans. Hammer. Angel. Great white. Tiger. Manta. Refined over millions of years, their powers are unique. They are super sharks. Together, they ensure the stability of our world's life support. The oceans. Our oceans need super sharks. We need them, and they need our help. Assemble the super sharks and help them save our seas.
Sharks and rays. They are ancient, enigmatic, misunderstood, and essential to our oceans. But these important animals are under immense pressure. As the Save Our Seas Foundation, we're here to help. Through supporting research, conservation, and education, we work to ensure a future for sharks and rays. The Save Our Seas Foundation. Together, we can make a difference.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Save Our Seas Foundation Distinguished Speaker Series. Thank you all for joining tonight. My name is Lance. I am the Director of Environmental Sustainability at the Museum of Discovery and Science in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We are joined tonight by Miss Jillian Morris. She is going to be talking to us all about her very unique project, Project Lemonade. I'll give you guys a little time to think about what kind of shark Project Lemonade might be referring to. But she's going to be telling us all about this awesome project and some of the work that she's been doing with her organization, Sharks for Kids, and talking about education and involvement with youth and getting them involved in shark conservation and education. So We'll get started with that in a few minutes. Just a quick note. So tonight, I come to you from the Museum of Discovery and Science in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. If you ever get a chance to come visit our wonderful museum, here's a picture of it. We're in Fort Lauderdale. We have our 4 major kind of strategic action pillars. Everything that we do is kind of guided by these 4 topics of environmental sustainability, physical science education, early childhood education, health and wellness education. And through those 4 topics, we connect people to inspiring science. So we hope to do that with you tonight and hone in on that environmental sustainability aspect and connect you with a researcher that's out in the field doing the work. So that's a little bit about us. Thank you again to the Save Our Seas Foundation for making this possible and making this whole series possible. So this is, I think, the 6th installment this year, and we have quite a few more to go all the way through December. So make sure you join in and for the ones upcoming. A few little housekeeping things before we get started and I introduce Jillian. If you wouldn't mind just keeping yourself muted throughout the evening and your camera off for right now. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to ask it through the chat. As we're going through, Jillian will be talking all about her project. And if you have a burning question, don't wait to the end. You can type it into the chat and I'll be moderating. And if we can get to your question right then and there, we'll try to. There will be some time at the very end as well for questions. So don't worry. If you have a question about what we're talking about tonight, please type it into the chat and we will try to get to it. All right. With that, we'll introduce our speaker for tonight, Ms. Jillian Morris. So Ms. Jillian is born and raised in Maine, but Jillian's love for the ocean started at an early age and has continued to play an integral role in her adult life. She has spent thousands of hours in the field working and diving with sharks all across the globe. She's a mom, a marine biologist, a shark conservationist, author, and educator in no particular order. She is the founder and president of Sharks for Kids, a US-based nonprofit organization. She has filmed for numerous television shows and networks, has appeared on Shark Week, Shark Fest, and is a PADI ambassador. She was named Scuba Diving Magazine's July 2016 Sea Hero, awarded with the inaugural SharkCon Shark Hero Award in 2017, and was the Go Blue Awards 2020 Blue Ambassador of the Year. She is an author of Norman the Nurse Shark and Shark Superpowers and a member of the prestigious Ocean Artists Society. So much accolades and welcome, Jillian. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here to chat with everyone. And I love mods, and now my daughter gets to go. So that's really, really fun. And we enjoy the facility. So absolutely, it brings a new perspective to what you have when taking my daughter, who's almost 3 now. So yeah, there's something for everybody. So I will definitely recommend that as well to go check that out, because we really enjoy it as a family. So
yeah, it's a fun place. We're actually about to open a brand new early childhood exhibit. That will have a whole thing all about sharks and rays and all kinds of fun things.
Perfect. So, I'm so glad you guys include that. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here to talk about Project Lemonade, Sharks for Kids, and what this project is, how we're doing it, and why it's so important. All right, I'm going to go ahead if you're.
Yeah, go ahead, share your screen.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. All right, so we'll dive right in. All right. Yeah, well, thank you so much.
And just another reminder, if anyone has questions, just please feel free to type them right into the chat. I'll see them.
Great. So thank you again for everybody who's watching live. And thank you again for mods for hosting me. My name is Jillian, and I am a marine biologist, and I'm based in Bimini in the Bahamas, which is a very, very sharky place if you've ever been or heard about it, or if you've watched shows on TV about sharks, you've probably seen Bimini. And it's a really, really special place that was a big part of what started my career working with sharks. And I spend a lot of time studying sharks, diving with them, photographing, filming them, running Sharks for Kids. so really, most of my adult life actually revolves around these animals, and I'm really excited to be sharing that love for the ocean with my daughter. My husband also films for lots of TV shows, so we spend a lot of time in the water, and it's really been amazing sharing that with our friends and family, but now with our daughter as well. And these are just some photos that show what that work looks like. And again, the Bahamas has lots of sharks. It's the shark diving capital of the world. So very, very lucky, having spent a great deal of time with all sizes of sharks, different species as well. And they're really, really incredible, and something that has really changed my life and helped me, develop this career and built this life because of these animals and because of how much I care about them and how much I want to do what I can to protect them. So I was born in Maine. I grew up going to the ocean. My parents loved the water. And so I spent a lot of time in a lake because I grew up on a lake. So swimming and being in the water. And I had my dad's old snorkel mask and just have always been around the water. I told my parents I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was 5. I'm sure they thought it would pass. It was just a phase, but it didn't. And here I am. And after years of working in shark science and shark media, filming, doing TV, and creating a lot of media content, I had this idea that wouldn't it be amazing to have a place where you could have all these resources and opportunities for students? And this kind of came from visiting classrooms. My mom's a retired teacher now, but lots of friends were teachers. Hey, you work with sharks, can you come talk? And this was probably over 15 years ago. And so I'd go in and talk, and I was having a hard time finding other resources. They'd be like, hey, do you have a worksheet or something to hand out after the talk? And I wasn't finding a lot. So I thought, maybe we can create something. We can create a place where teachers, parents, kids can go, have all these free resources to encourage them to bring sharks into the classroom, the home learning space, the library, whatever it might be. And so Sharks for Kids was born in 2012. But the website officially launched in 2013. So we're approaching our 10-year anniversary, which is really, really exciting. And from the beginning, our goal has been to create the next generation of shark advocates through education, outreach, and adventure. So these are just a few of the images of, we're in classrooms with materials online, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but and we get kids out in the field. So it's sort of a 3-tiered approach to creating opportunities. Everything we do for students is free. So it's reducing financial barriers. It's making sure that kids have access to this information, because sharks are critical for healthy oceans, and we all need healthy oceans no matter where we live. So the thing that I love most is getting kids in the field. So I love this image. It's one of my favorite photos. This young girl, it's in Bimini, and we take students out on these field trips. And some of these students have never been on a boat. She sat on the beach in this very shallow area. There's stingrays there, and she didn't want to get in the water. And I sat with her, and we walked out, and we spent time, and I spent about 20 minutes with her, and finally got to this point. And she didn't feel comfortable with the snorkel. So I said, just try sticking your face in the water, see what happens. And this is what happened. And so I treasure this, because now she didn't want to get out of the water. It doesn't take a lot of time. She had a lot of fear, and now look at this. So that's the power of creating opportunities for students. It works for adults too. The ocean's a big place. It's vast. There's a lot of things we don't know about it. So it's very easy to have some fear about that, or fear about the animals that live there. But if you get a chance to actually go in the water and see these animals and have that experience for yourself, it can be life-changing. So we realized that creating these opportunities for students was far more important than we had realized when we first started, and it's become a huge part of what we do. Now, Project Lemonade. If you haven't guessed already, it's lemon sharks. So lemon sharks are one of my favorites, and having spent a lot of time in the Bahamas, I actually started my first lemon shark project in 2004 in the Marquesas Keys. And so I've spent a lot of time with these animals. I've learned a lot about them. And my husband and I were attending a film festival in Turks and Caicos, and we were speaking about sharks and filming and all these things. And one of the days he went out on a field trip to take people out to talk about underwater photo and video, and they saw some little lemon sharks. And so we started these conversations about, oh, do you see these sharks? Or there are a lot of them. And working with one of the local dive operators that also runs kayak and paddleboard tours, we see babies. We see the little ones all the time, everywhere in the mangroves. And we started asking questions about, is anyone studying them? Is anyone, has anyone looked at this or tried to understand anything about these animals? And they said no. And a big thing at that particular festival was in Turks and Caicos, they were going to announce a shark sanctuary. It didn't happen. This was in 2019. And so a big challenge to get laws put in place is if there isn't data that exists. So creating a shark sanctuary or a marine protected area or a fisheries regulation, you have to have data. And at the time, nobody had done research on the development affecting the mangroves, the animals there, and particularly these sharks. So we said, wow, that's really interesting. We'd love to help you out. We'd love to come in and set up some studies and research what these baby sharks are doing there, how long they're staying, are the mothers giving birth, which areas and all of that. And then COVID hit and everything fell apart for us. So we had to wait. So we waited patiently. And in 2022, we were able to travel and actually start this project to understand, taking what we know from the Bahamas, what we know from Florida about how these little sharks use the mangroves. So for those of you who don't know, that lemon sharks actually give birth to live babies. It's really remarkable. I've been lucky enough to actually see it. A female, she gave birth to 10 babies. They come out alive. They have an umbilical cord they break free of. Yes, that means these little sharks have a belly button. It's a belly button scar, but really, really cool. And so Turks and Caicos was actually part of the Bahamas until independence. And so the habitat, the ecosystems, it's very, very similar. So we already had a lot of data. The Bimini Shark Lab had 30 years of data, right, on this. Doc Gruber had studied these animals his entire career, and we had worked on various projects. So now we wanted to use some of that information that we had known and see, is it the same in Turks and Caicos, right? Are they using the mangroves for as long? Where are the big pregnant females coming to give birth? And one thing we know from the Bahamas is that the big pregnant females actually come back to the mangroves that they were born in to give birth. So none of these questions had been answered or looked at. And also there's a fisheries in Turks and Caicos. People still actually eat lemon shark. So the questions we have to answer are, how many sharks are there? How many females are coming in? And is that fishery sustainable, or does there need to be a regulation protection put in place? We don't know any of that. So we started last year and we got our team together. Myself, Candace Fields, who's holding the shark, is doing her PhD at FIU. She's actually working on oceanic whitetips, but was familiar with she's from the Bahamas, so very familiar with those ecosystems as well. Leanne Wynn on the other side is a marine scientist as well as a teacher. And so really important for the kid aspect, the student aspect. And then Duncan, who's standing there as well, who has years and years of experience working in Bimini and Florida on these similar projects. And working in any place that doesn't necessarily have a Home Depot, a West Marine, you always have to plan ahead, and which means you bring a lot of gear. So I like this photo. This was actually when we were heading to North Caicos this year. All our stuff for the ferry, that cooler's full of some bait we were using, things like that, lots of gear. And we were using drones, we were scouting. This was actually a new part of the project. We hadn't worked in North Caicos, but people were saying we're seeing sharks here and there. And so it was a really important step for us to expand our reach, to fully understand how these animals might be using all of these different islands and what their movements from island to island might be, if any, or do they just leave? There's so many questions that hadn't been answered, and we're really, really excited. And we're starting to answer them in year 2, but really excited. So we did a lot of scouting with drones. We're working with DECR. That's Chris. He's from the Department of Environmental and Coastal Resources, which is the permitting agency. So really bringing the community together to help us with this project. So usually we use gill nets. This has been very successful for capturing juvenile lemon sharks in an area. It's very efficient. It's minimal stress when the nets are checked very quickly, but it's illegal in Turks and Caicos. So this was one of our first challenges. Okay, how are we going to catch these sharks? That's what we would normally do, but now we can't do that. Okay, we understand that. So we were using drum lines, which are, this is a much deeper set. We're using much smaller for smaller sharks. And so we worked with this. We had some success, but what we actually found was that using a dip net works really, really well. So put a little bait in the water, scoop that little shark up, and then do the workup. It's much more efficient, less stressful on the animal. And so this has actually become one of our main methods for capture. And we can actually target the shark we want. So you can see 3 sharks there. If we've already notched them, and I'll explain what the notch is in a minute, we don't catch that shark again. So if we had a gill net there, we might catch that again and again and again and again. This way, we're catching the shark once. Right? Unless it's a recap from last year, then we've caught it twice. But we're minimizing our stress on the animal. So it's actually a really, really ideal method of capture, but it takes a lot of patience. And Phil, who works for Big Blue Collective, who's there with the net, is really, really good at this and very helpful. But it certainly takes a lot of patience.
Jillian, can I ask you, how do you get the sharks to come to you?
So we put a tiny bit of bait in the water. So in order to work with sharks, it's just like fishing. Any method you're using, long lines, drum lines, you have to put a little bit of bait in the water to get them interested. But as you can see, it's very shallow. We know they're in this area. Working with the local community has been a big part of this. So Phil works for Big Blue. It's a dive up, but they run the paddleboard and the eco tours here. So they're the ones seeing the sharks. They're seeing them in the mangroves, the areas. So they actually helped us determine which areas we were going to start working in because of years and years and years of 20 plus years of seeing these sharks. So they're very, very excited because for 20 plus years, they've seen these sharks and had no idea really about them. And so they have been critical for local knowledge and helping us understand where to actually work from.
Right.
And so, yeah, just a little bit of bait.
We had a question come in, and so maybe not, some of our guests aren't from Florida. They're not so used to being in the water with sharks. That's a pretty common thing for maybe for you. And for myself, I've been in the water with sharks and I'm quite familiar with them. But to someone that maybe hasn't been in the water with sharks, you're in the water with a shark. So do you have to worry about them and their teeth? Do you have to, I imagine these small ones, not so much. But if you're in deeper water with some larger sharks, do you guys have to worry about that?
I think the big thing to always remember is these are wild animals. No matter what size they are, they're wild animals. And like any wild animal, we have to be respectful of that. So yeah, I think you have to be very mindful of where you are, how you're behaving with any species. And every situation is different. If you're in very deep water, it's different than how you would in ankle, shin deep water. So
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is to remember that they are wild animals, but if we're respectful, we're not, in this situation, we are scooping them, but when I'm diving with them or free diving, I'm not grabbing them. I'm not trying to ride them. I'm not, touching them. I'm giving them their space so that they're not feeling threatened by me. I'm also, I don't look like food. I don't smell like food. I'm another big predator in the water. So, and making eye contact as well. When you're looking at the animal and showing that you're taking space and you're also another big animal in the water, they're less likely to kind of be, some sharks are ambush predators. So that means they're trying to sneak up. But if you're watching them, you've taken away the element of surprise. So it's very easy in the sense that if you work with a professional operator that's done this, and is mindful of each species can be very different. Each shark on different days, they have personalities, but it's very possible to have safe and remarkable encounters with all these different species.
Yeah, I agree. And that's often what I tell people too, is that they are wild animals, respect them, but I'm not food to them, right? So they don't look at you in that way. But cool, thank you.
Yeah. So we've discovered that this is the best way for us to capture these sharks. And once we do that, there we go. We do what's called a scientific workup. And this is pretty standard around the world. It's very specific data that's collected from sharks. And some scientists collect much more than that, but it's really there's very basic measurements and data collection that's done. And so you see here, we have this little shark. We're measuring this one in the water. Sometimes it's easier with the smaller sharks to keep them. And everybody works as a team. Everyone knows their job. You do this very quickly and you let the animal go. And what I want you to notice, and I'll explain it in a minute, is the triangular notch out of that shark's dorsal fin. That is not natural. We put that there, but I will tell you why in just a second. So we're taking length measurements. We measure from the tip of the shark's nose to the tip of its tail. That's its total length. Tip of the nose to the start of the tail. That's the precaudal length. And the tip of the nose to where the tail forks. Think of a shark's tail that splits. That's the fork length. We also measure around just behind the pectoral fins, sort of think where the shark's armpits would be, around for girth. And the reason we do this is we're looking at growth rates. So if we catch the shark again, we can see how much it's grown. And maybe the sharks in this area in Turks and Caicos grow quicker than they might do in the Bahamas or Florida, or they don't grow as quick. We have a feeling here they grow quicker because there isn't a huge mangrove area. So they're probably having to go to deeper water sooner. So they're going to need to grow quicker in order to be able to survive in deeper water, because the carrying capacity or the space, the food, the actual space that's available is only going to support so many sharks. So they're going to have to grow up quick and move out to deeper water. So you can see here, just taking measurements. We have our very fancy piece of equipment. It's a cooler. So it works perfectly. We fill it with salt water. We throw the shark in. You make do with what you have in some places. And this is actually ideal. And you can see us taking the measurements. The students are watching there. And we're writing down all our data.
Perfect.
So
it floats. You can tie a rope to it. Drag
it
along,
floats.
right?
You can hold it. And we just refill it with fresh water each time so that they have enough oxygenated water for that. And when you saw the little notch, what we do is we take a DNA sample. So it's about the size of your thumbnail, probably not even that big. And we cut it from the shark's dorsal fin. We use this because think of clipping your nails or cutting your hair. Right? You shouldn't feel it if you're doing it right. If you're feeling you're clipping your nails or cutting your hair, something is not right. You're doing it wrong. So we take that little notch. You can see it goes in a vial and it's actually shipped off to a lab. And what we're looking at for this project is we can do a shark family tree. So we're trying to figure out siblings and then litters. So litters of pups. How many baby sharks, just like a litter of kittens or a litter of puppies, how many baby sharks might be related? And then ultimately, how many mothers are coming into this area to give birth, right? Is it 1? Is it 5? We don't believe it's a big number of 20 or something like that, but is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? And so this actual DNA can help us figure that out. And then every shark gets a pit tag. These are very small sharks, so we cannot put a huge tag on them. Pit tags are amazing. If you have a pet at home that's microchipped, exact same thing. But we're not trying to find lost sharks, so it doesn't have a phone number or an address. It simply has that number. You can see that big long number there. And we use a syringe. We inject it just below the dorsal fin. These last for at least 20 years. And when we catch the shark, we scan it, and then we insert this tiny little tag. So it goes right in. You can watch just below the dorsal fin. Use that needle just like when you get a shot at the doctor's office, except it's a tiny little chip.
How many of those chips have you used? How many have you put it in the sharks?
So we've caught over 30 on this project. So yeah, me personally, I've done hundreds. It's very common. It's cost effective. They're much cheaper than some of the bigger tags, but there's always an exchange, right? So they're cheaper, but you have to catch the shark again. So you have to have that animal again to rescan it and then remeasure it or find if it's in a new location. So it's really a fairly inexpensive way for us to give the shark a name tag. That's really what we're doing.
It gives you some longevity too, right? So that way, whenever, 20 years, you said 20 years, so that's a huge opportunity to continue studying. Because you said that the adults come back to the same area they gave birth in. So you could potentially track a mother shark through her life, using that one tag. So that's really awesome.
And also, if other scientists are working in an area and they happen to, it means that we can also collaborate on that, which is really great. So if somebody else is using that tag and they scan a shark and they go, wait, this isn't one of our tags, they can start reaching out to people and let us know, which is great. And so it's a great tool for collaboration as well. And yeah, so we find it very effective for these kind of projects. And at least to start, we may pursue some other tags, but for now, this is where we're starting, because it's really it's the right tag for the data that we're trying to collect. We also take part of that is the DNA sample, but also, and you can see this is Phil, is training up a local team. That's been a big part of this. So a lot of times scientists go into places and go to this area that they want to do research, and they're not necessarily always working with the local community. And we decided that that was really, really important. So getting the local team involved. So Ellie, who's got the kind of the flowered hat, she's actually a marine biologist from the UK who's working at the dive center and helping run eco tours. Phil's one of the owners. Arenthia, who's learning how to hold the shark, is one of our local team members who's doing school visits as well. So for us, it was really, really important from the beginning to involve the local community so that there is sustainability with this project. I don't want to work on this project. I mean, I'd love that, but it doesn't need to be me for the next 20 years. But 20 years from now, maybe Arenthia or these other students we're talking with can continue this project. That's the big part of it. And when you work with the community and you get everybody involved, especially as we're trying to understand this fishery, where are these sharks coming from? Which sharks are being caught? What markets are they going to? We've been told restaurants are serving it. So there's a much bigger part of this, and having the local community involved and invested is far more effective than just us who are visitors coming in. Now we're lending our expertise to this project, but it's also a big part of it is helping a local community understand and be involved to be able to continue that.
How many people are on the local team? How many people do you have there?
So we started, so the Big Blue team, which is the dive shop we're working with, which is they provide the boats for us and a lot of the knowledge. There's 3 or 4 people that have worked with us from their team. And then we work with a youth center to get the students out, which I'll talk about. And then we had an intern last year and he was back this year. His name is Lewis. So he's phenomenal. We're really excited to get him. He's actually going to school for marine science. And then Arenthia, who actually works for the National Trust there, but is heavily involved in doing a lot of school programs. She actually did a camp and spoke about sharks with one of our projects today. So yeah, so it's building that team. And yeah, it's exciting. So each year we'll definitely add more and get them trained up so that hopefully they're going to start taking over and taking some leadership roles in the project as well. So the next part of this, when we developed it, was we have to get students out. So we have to find the logistics, we have to scout, we have to do all this. But then once we have kind of an idea, let's get students out. So we got a few students out last year because last year was really the pilot program. It was, can we even catch sharks? What's going to happen? Where are we going to see them? And like so much research and fishing for animals, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to find. And we were very, very successful. So we felt like, let's bring out some students. So these students are actually setting a BRUV, which is a baited remote underwater video system. Lets us spy on the sharks, put a little bait in the thing, put a GoPro on, put it in the water for about an hour, and we see what shows up. So this is in really shallow water. You see some of the piece and you'll just see a little lemon shark come by and say hello. Yeah, there's and that one had been clipped, you could see there. So that's what I was talking about. When we have that triangle and then we're standing there, we can actually see that and say, oh, nope, we don't want to catch that one because we've already caught that one. We don't need to catch it again. So when the students come out with us, we do start with a classroom setting while we're getting things ready and while we're catching the sharks. So because sometimes it can be a long wait. So Leanne, who's the science teacher, gave them classes on ecology, mangrove, shark anatomy. And then we also go through the whole process of why we're catching the sharks and what we're going to do when we catch them so that the students are ready. And the students we brought out this year, we brought out 20 students from middle school and high school, which was really, really exciting. And so that they're ready. And then once we have the shark from the net, we transfer into our very fancy cooler. And you can see the students are all ready. Everybody gets a job. So long before we actually catch the shark, every student has their job. They've been shown what's going to happen. And usually if we can, we try and show a little bit of it with the first shark, just so they're not, we've told them, but it's a little bit easier if you see. So we walk them through that. So every student has a job and they get ready, and we do this very, very quickly so that we can release the shark. So this was the first shark we caught from the project, which was really exciting. And we actually had the cooler on the boat. We brought it on the boat because we were working right there, and it made it a little bit easier. The water was a little bit deeper where we were, so this just worked better. The students got to see everything. And once we have that shark, these students are scanning for pit tags, because this year we knew, or hoped, we didn't know, we hoped we would catch some of last year's sharks. So here the students are, they're going ahead, they're scanning to see if if there is a tag. There is a tag, which we did have recaps, which is very, very exciting, because it tells us that these sharks are using this area for at least a year, probably longer. It helps us understand growth rates as well, and where they're moving in and around this mangrove system. So then we measure the shark. You can see having the students assist with that. So they're helping with all aspects. Holding the cooler, an important job as well. So everybody has an important job. Taking the DNA, which is clipping that little piece of the dorsal fin. Putting a pit tag in. And you can see, watch the student smile. Like, it's pretty amazing. So that kid is 14 years old and got to tag a shark. I mean, I would have been over the moon if I had gotten to do something like that. Growing up in Maine, I got to go out on a lobster boat, and we got to see seals and stuff when I was young, and I was just psyched about that. So these kids are excited, and the smiles that are on their face, the ability to be part of this research. We're not going out just to do something cool for students. They're actually part of real data collection. And you can see everybody's excited. This is amazing. And this student actually got to come back with us this year. I was really happy to see him. He is very, very interested, and is definitely going to be a student that continues on this project with us. And I hope that potentially maybe this is a project he can do at university and continue with, even maybe a post-grad project for him. So that would be ideal, but he's really helpful. He's really keen, and he just loves being out there with us. And this is Candace. So you can see that she's showing the umbilical scar. I'm going to go back a little bit there. So when I mentioned, come on, let me go back a little bit. Nope. All right, it's not going to let me. Sorry guys, it jumped ahead. So you can see where Candace is pointing. That's the belly button scar. It's really an umbilical scar. So we also look at that when we're catching these sharks, because when it's open and fresh like that, we know they were born this year and probably within the last month. And then it starts to close and close and close and close, so that can also help us determine whether it was caught. It's last year's newborn, so it's a young of the year this year, or maybe it's even 2 or 3 years old. So that can really help us. So we look at that, we flip the shark over in tonic immobility, kind of goes into sleep-like state. Very handy for collecting blood, looking at this, looking at male or female, and just also, we're also showing the students. So we're also showing them the underside of the shark. We're letting them touch the shark to really understand and see anything from the eyes, the mouth, every aspect of it, because you can do that very safely and very quickly in the process of the workup. And
just a note, so you mentioned tonic immobility. So for anyone else that maybe don't know what that is, so if some sharks, if you flip them upside down, it makes them relax, and they become very docile, and it's kind of like relaxed, and so you could do what you need to do.
Yeah, it's a sleep-like state that when you flip a shark over, it takes longer, and some rubbing the snout. If you've seen people with the chainmail suits and they're rubbing the snout, they go in this kind of trance, and it acts as actual anesthesia. So when we're doing some tags and we insert them surgically, you can make an incision in a shark while it's in that state, pop that tag in, a couple stitches, it doesn't move. And you'd never be able to do that to a shark if it could feel it. So it's a very useful tool. It's a natural behavior that males will actually flip females when they're mating, but male sharks do it as well. So that doesn't fully explain why they actually go into this state, but very, very useful for us when collecting specific data, and hopefully making it easier on the animal as well.
And another note of lemon sharks, they can pump water through their gills on their own. They can rest on the bottom. So And
Yep.
a lot of people may be familiar with some sharks have to swim to breathe, like a great white or a hammerhead shark. The lemon sharks don't have to do that. They can rest on the bottom and still, or in a cooler,
Yeah,
right?
in a cooler. So
And still pump water over their gills and still breathe.
absolutely.
Right.
So there are species that can lay on the bottom and just open, close, and suck that water in and move it over their gills. Whereas the other things, like you mentioned, exactly, great hammerheads, great whites, makos, they have to ram ventilate. They have to move forward and ram that water in. So yes, absolutely. So, but even if you're flipping certain species, there's still, it's almost like we breathe when we're asleep still. You don't have to think about it. But it's still something that, because if they're flipping females into that state, then why does it work on males as well? So it's still something that we don't actually know the purpose or why, and which with sharks, there are so many questions we have no idea about, which is exciting, but also part of the reason we are studying them and working to protect the oceans, because there's so many questions that we need to answer in order to protect these animals. All right, so collecting our data, then we're going to go ahead and release the shark. It goes off on its way. And you can see those beautiful mangroves. And so we really want to understand what needs to. Now, this area is actually a preserve. So these little sharks are protected in this area. But in 2 years, if they swim out the channel to deeper water, they're not protected. There are no sharks are not protected at all in the Turks and Caicos. So part of this is to understand whether or not certain other areas need to be protected, whether there is going to be a season of protection. There's a lot of questions to answer, but really working with the government agencies, with fisheries and the DECR, is to let them know how these populations are doing, what's affecting them, and what's going on, to advise for management of these species. That's really ultimately the first goal of the project. But the second part of that is getting as many kids out in the field as we can participating with us, because then it becomes, they're part of it. So they're more likely to care about this species, care about the ocean, all of that. Anytime you can create a firsthand experience for someone, they're far more likely to care and make choices to protect that and support that than they are if they have no experience with it at all. So some happy faces. Usually do a quick, the kids were all, they were psyched and doing all their poses for the photos, as middle school and high school kids will do. I think these were all middle school kids. A lot of happy faces, working with the team. And it's long.
Were they local middle school kids?
Yeah, they're all from Turks and Caicos. So, So we worked with a youth center there, and they help us get students to get with the school and and let them know that, hey, this is an opportunity. Try to get students that are really interested in marine science or something like this, and so they help us actually get the students and recruit them. They come out. I give these students credit because it was hot, it was long days, and as you can see, there's not a lot of shade, so they're out there, so they really got the field experience. And so being out in the sun and being hot and waiting for animals. And we had a couple days we didn't actually get any sharks, which is always really sad for the students, but we get it that some days you're not going to catch the animals. It's part of research and there's no guarantee. And so these students were all really, really incredible. And the feedback was amazing. And we got messages from the parents, and and so you can see just lots of happy students ready. This same group, we caught a bunch of sharks that day. Lewis, our intern. And you can kind of see as well some of the kayaks. That's some of the areas that we know in this area, because it's such an important ecotourism area as well. And so getting that knowledge of reports from them. And so afterwards, it's really cool when the paddleboard tours, when they tell us, oh, we saw the North Shark, we saw this. It's great to hear that feedback. And the final part of this is not all the students can go out, and certainly not the really young ones. So we take it to the classroom. So you can see Candace is here talking about the pit tags and explaining to the students. This was in North Caicos, much smaller schools, a smaller island. And so it was really wonderful to get there, answer questions. and help these students know that if this is something they're interested in, there are going to be opportunities. And there are some really incredible organizations on the islands doing coral reef work, turtles. And so there's a lot of opportunities for them to continue to get involved, and summer camps that are environmentally focused. And so just to get them thinking about, you can be part of this, but what can you do now? And like anywhere in the world, there's a lot of fear around sharks and a lot of misinformation. So if we give students facts and we show them, look, we're here, we're working with the sharks that are in your backyard essentially, and help them understand why we're doing it, it takes away a lot of that fear. And I think that's really, really important. And then when they grow up, they're making decisions to support the ocean, from how they vote, how they shop, the jobs they pursue. And so we start that at a young age. So this is just as important as the research. And so this project combines all of that. So we're very busy. We're in the schools, we're doing this, and some days we're in the field and in the schools. But it's really, really worth it, because we are seeing these kids excited about sharks. We're seeing them ask really great questions. And then you have teachers asking questions as well. So these are adults that are afraid of sharks and have grown up being afraid of sharks, but now are having all these really great questions. So it's also, it's connecting with the community as a whole, and really giving them a chance to see these animals differently, but also hearing their stories and understanding, why are they afraid of sharks? What part of their culture is relying on sharks? How many people are eating shark? And really having these conversations and giving everybody a seat at the table, so that if whatever conservation efforts we're making through this data, through this research, that everybody has a voice and it's sustainable because the community is involved. All right, we're not making decisions as foreigners, we're working with the community to help advise on decisions that benefit everybody, because everybody's voice is being heard. And kids are a stakeholder that are often overlooked. They are a very, very, very important stakeholder. They influence their parents, they influence the community. I always tell people, if a 5-year-old says, hey, pick up your trash off the beach, they see you throw, somebody throws their trash on the ground, the kid says, hey, what are you doing? They're going to get a very different response than if I say that to that same person.
Yeah.
And so, or talk, hey, mom and dad, why aren't you using, or, or hey, uncle, or hey, whoever their family is, hey, why aren't you using a reusable this or that? It makes adults think. This is why kids are powerful. This is why we have to get into schools, and this is why we have to get kids into the field. And this is just kind of a little video, just kind of recapping everything. Hopefully, let me know.
We can't hear it.
That. You can't hear it?
No.
Okay, actually, let me do this then. Pause. Let me stop the share. Just give me 1 second. Okay,
Yeah.
and let me screen share it again and make sure it goes. Okay. Let's see if it's going to work. It came up with some sort of. No. Do you hear that now?
No.
It came up with some sort of Zoom audio thing. Okay, well, I'm going to tell everyone that this video is on the page I'm going to share with you. It really is just a recap of the project. So
and it's on your YouTube as well, right?
Yeah, and you can just kind of see like it'll show some clips. So you can go ahead and check that out. It's on YouTube, it's on our website, and it's really just an overview of what I shared with you. So as kind of a recap. And yeah, so ultimately it's a project that has a lot of levels. It's very complex because we're bringing a lot of aspects together, but it felt like this is how we wanted to do this. We wanted to combine the community, and like I said, it's students, it's sharks, it's science, and it's been very, very successful. So we're seeing an impact already. We're seeing kids excited, engaged, and the community center, youth center, the schools. There's already a waiting list for next year when we go back, and in November when we go back. So that's really, really exciting. And we have teachers that want to get out. So everybody is really, really excited. And that to me is a success already. And hopefully we have years to come with this, and we can continue this work. That's our plan, and get more and more of the local community involved and taking on leadership roles. And just a shout out to our funders. This is a Save Our Seas Keystone grant, which is amazing. And so thankful for everyone who's believing in this project, and our local partners, the Edward Garland Youth Center and Big Blue Collective, for making this possible. So it's really a lot of groups, a lot of people coming together to make something possible, to bring research and students together for a really special project that we're incredibly proud of and excited to see where it goes.
Awesome.
Oh,
It sounds like such an amazing project. What in your website? Yes, I'm
glad
you.
This is the website, Sharks for Kids, but you can go right there to Project Lemonade and you can see all the updates, and that's where you can actually watch this video. So if you go on, there's 3 different videos. That's what we have so far. We'll have some more stuff. You can also check out our social media pages as well, and follow us. Lots of updates coming out from this project. We have a lot of content and updates and things that we've been doing. So definitely stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot of information coming out.
Excellent. Yeah, and for any teachers that are watching it, you have a lot of really great resources for lessons in classrooms too. So yeah, so I think it's this project is so amazing because it as you were saying, it joins the research with the education, and what better ambassador for the environment than a shark, right? Especially a super cute little lemon shark, right?
A baby shark, right? And kids love Baby Shark.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that song maybe more than anyone on the planet. I'm convinced,
Right.
between Sharks for Kids and my daughter. And so, but kids, I think kids aren't born with that fear. So if we can get them facts and get them excited and teach them to respect these animals. And I mean, it's okay. If you are afraid of sharks, that is also okay. You can still protect something or make better choices, even if you're afraid of something. You don't have to, everybody who learns about sharks, you don't have to love them. You don't have to dedicate your life to them, but you can still do something. And it's the time is now. We have to, these animals are under threat. And the time is now for all of us to take actions for sharks and for oceans and for the environment.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's perfect. So we have a few questions rolling in from earlier presentation, and a few from more recently as well. But I just want to get to a few of them, and then I have a few little questions too. So if you don't mind sticking around for a lightning round of questions, if you don't mind. We got about 8 minutes or so. So so one of our guests asked a question about the siblings. You mentioned you can track, well, you will be able to track through the genetic and doing the genetic makeup or markup of the lemon sharks with a little notch you take from them, right? So have you advanced to that stage yet? Can you actually see siblings yet? Have you looked at the genetic data to see?
The genetic data is at the lab. There's Dr. Kevin Feldheim, who is in Chicago. He's sort of the geneticist that a lot of shark scientists work with around the world. So he has our samples and is currently working on that. So yeah, it'll be really, really exciting. And that's something that we will update and we will talk about and share. So yeah, I mean, we can make assumptions based on what we've seen, but that will really tell us how many sharks are using this area to give birth, which is really exciting.
Right. We had another question about tags. Do some tags work better than other tags? And I know you were saying that the tags you are using are because they're more available through because they're a little bit cheaper. They last longer, right? But think about maybe how would you expand this project? How would you if you were given that blank check, would you use satellite tagging? Would you use other video tag? How would you expand in the tracking of these animals?
Well, because they're so small, the satellite technology, the tags we have are still pretty large for these animals. And they're dorsal fin, which you need a really rigid, large dorsal fin. These little sharks, it would affect their swimming. So, but certainly acoustic tags that we could put in. So there are smaller acoustic tags, which they're acoustic, they make a noise. They're either, most likely with the little sharks, we would actually insert them into the cavity, the abdomen kind of cavity, and then having receivers, and those tags and those receivers, the receivers are actually more expensive. That's the underwater listening station for those sharks. So what that would do is tell us a lot more about their movements in and out of these mangrove habitats during the day, during the tide cycles. We've seen a bit, but it would give us a lot more information about that if we could acoustic tag and have an array of these receivers, because it's these receivers. I mean, it's really how you can spy on sharks, right? You can see what they're doing when you're not actually seeing them. I mean, we can observe a lot when we're catching them, and we have local observations of where they're seeing them and recording that, and drone surveys and things like that. But if we could learn a little bit more about those kind of finite movements used on that would be really interesting as well.
Cool. Another question about, I know you had mentioned that, and we talked briefly about the mother's sharks coming back to the same mangrove areas to have their young. Do we know how they do that? Is it similar to sea turtles, and we think maybe a magnetic field sort of thing, or is
it's
environmental conditions? Well, how do they find?
So sharks are using their ampullae of Lorenzini to detect electrical pulses, but also magnetic fields. So and so that kind of we don't know that it's every shark that's doing that, but we know enough of them have, and we won't know for some time, and other maybe approaches to our research if that's what's happening here. But a lot of times in research, especially if it's the same animal that's been studied elsewhere, you kind of use that as a starting point. Like, we know these things because of this, so let's find out if it's true here. And if it's not, what's different? What's changing that? So why would it be? Or is it just that these lemon sharks are passing through and this happens to be the only mangroves in that area? So that's where they're going to go. Or how far are those adult lemons going? You know, we know they do migrate. So how far? Where else are they going to then come back? So again, it'll be really interesting to see, you know, long term, there's a lot of questions to answer, which is really, really exciting. And so to have started that as well it's really interesting to know that there's a lot of questions to answer, and how the project might expand.
That's good for future researchers, you know, like when you were giving your introduction, you're like living the dream of every middle school and elementary school student that watches Shark Week and sees that scientist and it says marine biologist, and they're like, I want to do that. That was me when I was in middle school, actually. When I was in 6th grade. You're doing it, right? And you're educating along the way. It's really amazing. I commend you for doing that. So just before we have a few more minutes to wrap up, just if anyone's out there and they want to follow in your footsteps, what would be some advice that you might give them to get involved in this kind of research, and maybe do what you do and keep it going?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is follow your passion. I grew up in a really small town. I didn't know anybody. I'd never seen anybody that did what I wanted to do. And I found a book at a yard sale my mom bought that had Sylvia Earle in it. And I was just like, wow, there's a woman doing this. And so I think, and I never wavered from that. And so I think if you're young and this is what you want to do, find a way. And there are lots of opportunities, and don't be afraid to ask people who are mentors, or reach out to people, ask them questions, and don't ever be afraid to send a nice email, a nice message to ask for some advice. And I think gaining experience is really, really important. It's in this field, a degree is no longer enough. It's too competitive. And so anything from knowing how to fish to driving a boat to learning to dive to working in a lab, there's so many opportunities for marine scientists, and how you can work in that field. Or say you're into engineering, develop a tag. I mean, there's so many ways to get involved. So I think it's just one, follow that passion. You're probably going to hear no's. There's going to be challenges. That's part of it, but it's what you do with that. And so there are definitely opportunities out there. So I think the biggest thing is to find really good mentors to talk to and help, and also gain that experience, volunteering, interning, lots of opportunities that exist out there. And even if they're, say you're landlocked, you live in Idaho, right? And you find this aquarium and they don't have ask, hey, can I show up on Saturdays? Because the answer is always no, unless you ask. So find out, because they might not have an intern program, but if somebody's willing to show up and help out, they might be willing to give you a chance.
Mhm.
So I think it's worthwhile to pursue what's local. You don't always have to travel. If you can, great, that's amazing. There's lots of opportunities, but also see what's local and what's available as well.
That's amazing. That's great advice. Thank you very much. There are more questions. I don't think we have time to get to all of them, but you said it came out of your mouth. Can they send you a message? Can they
Absolutely.
contact you
Yeah.
through Sharks for
Absolutely.
Kids? You know,
Definitely.
and if they have any other questions for you guys, for you and about your project and what you're doing,
Yeah.
they can reach out to you, right?
Yeah, definitely. sharksforkids.com. And I showed you where the lemonades. Stay tuned. Our social media pages, we're sharing updates.
Great.
And so we're trying to keep people posted on that. But yeah, absolutely feel free to reach out and ask questions. I'm always happy to do my best to answer them.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation tonight and learning more about Project Lemonade. Just the name of it, it's so good. So
Yeah,
good.
my husband came up with that one. I can't take credit for that, but yes, it's fun. It's been really fun. So, and it gets people right? It gets people talking about it. So when that's what we want. We want to start conversations about conservation. So yeah, it's good for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And for those of you that thank you all for joining in. And stay tuned, you know, stay up to date, check in on Sharks for Kids and see what they're up to. Thanks, Jillian. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you.
And for next time, those of you are welcome, come on back on August 3rd. We're having our next Save Our Seas Distinguished Speaker Series. It will be about the Shark Conservation Fund and the work that they are doing to protect threatened sharks and rays by Mr. Lee Crockett, the Executive Director of the Shark Research Fund, will be visiting us through Zoom and telling us all about their amazing projects and the research that they are doing. So join us then. Thank you to the Save Our Seas Foundation for funding and giving us support to bring you amazing shark researchers like Jillian tonight. We really appreciate it, and we hope we will see you next time. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night. Bye-bye.